much love to the music. It gets much respect. Can you dig it? Yeah!
Welcome back to the Webuverse. You're on What is the Webuverse? Well, that Webuverse is the dimension that we participate in every day. Right now, I'm building something and I'm going to send it out, package it, send it out, and put it on the Webuverse. And that's where you're going to see it. This thing that we call the internet. However, it can be infinite. We have to build that, which means that we would be in pursuit of trying to make it infinite. But anyway, you know who I am, Michael P. America. Welcome back to the Michael P. America Show. And today we're going to do something a little different. I love the conversation about UFOs. They call them UAPs now or whatever. And I'm like, I can't really get with that because I know they're adding a different distinction. They're still trying to tell you that you don't see what you see, that you see what they want you to see, that kind of thing. But we're going to get past that, and I'm going to take you back in time. Check this out.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, yet as mortal as his own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as ours are to the beasts in the jungle, intellects, vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. In the 39th year of the 20th century came the Great Disillusionment. Near the end of October, business was better. The war scare was over. More men were back at work. Sales were picking up. On this particular evening, October 30th, the Crosley service estimated that 32 million people were listening in on radios.
That was from Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. We're going to talk about that in a second. We are going to talk about UFOs. We are going to talk about abductions. So let's get to it. People have a tendency to fear what society has already created as a predisposition. This is the power of media. The power of media is to make you consider suggestions or to make you reject the plausibility of real solutions and options based on the wishes of those who wish to co-opt culture. One such example is the question that we keep asking. Are we alone in the universe? A good question. On October 30th, 1938, Orson Welles' radio adaptation of H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds famously had caused panic among listeners who believed in a real Martian invasion. They believed it was really occurring. We later find out that the reporting of the show that followed actually caused whatever panic could be attributed to the show, okay? This program was a Halloween episode of the Mercury Theater that aired on the evening broadcast live on CBS Radio. It was directed and narrated by Orson Welles. The adaptation was written by Howard Koch and based on the H.G. Wells 1898 novel. The broadcast used simulated news bulletin format, interrupting a fictional evening of music and programming with reports of alien attacks and creating the illusion of a real-time Martian invasion in New Jersey and New York. Now, it's been stated that Wells and his team worked under really tight deadlines and that Koch initially found the script dull, but Wells did something interesting, okay? Wells suggested adding news flashes and eyewitness accounts to heighten realism. The adaptation shifted the story's setting from 19th century England to 20th century America, with the first Martian landing at Grover's Mill, New Jersey. They had actors impersonating reporters and scientists, government officials, including a convincing imitation of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, while sound effects and orchestral music enhanced the drama. Now, many listeners missed the open disclaimer and believed that the broadcast was real. Panic ensued. People called the police, the newspapers, radio stations. Some fled their homes, and emergency services were overwhelmed. There were reports of heart attacks, suicides, and mass hysteria, and then this circulated. And then something interesting. Modern research actually suggests the scale of the panic was exaggerated. So think about that. And this is what I'm saying. It was the media after the fact that really promoted this. Okay? CBS executives demanded a station break to clarify the fiction. Are they clarifying it? They're not clarifying. They know their show. They're sitting there right there, a lot of them, when they're filming, right? Because they've got the ad guys, and the ad guys are probably sitting there going, you can't say that. And come on, man. I believe this was very calculated, but okay, I can't prove it. But Wells delayed the announcement. So CBS executives demanded a station break to clarify fiction, but Wells delayed the announcement until 42 minutes into the program, by which time many listeners were already alarmed. And I can believe that there was probably, some folks out there that couldn't figure it out. So the most interesting thing out of this is that the broadcast made Orson Welles a national celebrity, basically a superstar at the age of 23, showcasing his innovative storytelling and mastery of radio drama, okay? It highlighted the power of radio as a medium and prompted discussions about media and the responsibility and the potential regulation by the FCC. The event has since become a landmark media history, or I would say a landmark in media history, all right? And it's often cited as a classic example of the influence of broadcast media on the public perception, right? And we've seen this. When you go to war, they're telling you what you are seeing. Don't really know if that's what we're seeing. They're probably using old clips from who knows when. It's always the same one. It's the missiles being fired off in the dark, can't see anything. That could have been clips from 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We don't know. But the power of media can take you places that you haven't really been. The War of the Worlds broadcast remains a seminal moment in entertainment media studies, and it inspired later adaptations of the film. And it inspired adaptations in television and radio. And it's remembered for its ingenious use of realism, suspense, and audience manipulation. Now, Orson Welles' radio adaptation of The War of the Worlds combined innovative production techniques realistic news format, and dramatic storytelling to create one of the most famous events in history, demonstrating both the power and responsibility of mass communications. Now, there are some films that are out there that I really like, that are that actually are using the same production techniques, such as Signs. I love Signs. Mel Gibson, M. Night Shyamalan. Watch it over and over. Love the little girl's got the quirks with the water, and it's like I can relate, right? Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You know that I was executive producer on a film called Assimilate that basically takes ideas from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Nope. Peele did an amazing job, and the actors were great. The storytelling's incredible. Night of the Living Dead. Romero, that's really great. Apollo 18, I love that. It seems, when you start watching Apollo 18, you're going to ask, where is this really going? And they mess with you. You're sitting there going, is this real stuff? And, why didn't they go back to the moon? You start asking those kinds of questions. And then there's the fourth kind that use horror and, and all of these used horror and sci-fi elements purely for storytelling and social commentary. And remember one thing, all of these are fictitious characters, right? And this takes us to our real conversation. So let me start off by asking you, do you believe in vampires, little boy? That is a memorable line from the 1972 TV movie, The Night Stalker, in which Darren McGavin played investigative reporter Carl Koschak. All right. If you like horror and you like sci-fi, then you know The Night Stalker. That was my flick. I could do it. Darren McGavin was incredible in that. Everybody was incredible in that show. In the film, Koschak becomes convinced that a serial killer in Las Vegas, Janos Skorzeny, is a real vampire, and it's based on the killer's method of draining blood from his victims. So what's interesting is that that line that I just gave you reflects his character's skepticism towards those in authorities in regards to their inability, no matter what their reasoning, to consider the improbable as probable. Now, if you are a Trekkie, in the words of Star Trek's Mr. Spock, and when I was a kid, I used to call it Star Trek, and I don't know why, because it reads Trek, but, could have been where I come from, or where I came from, right? What does Mr. Spock say? When you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, how improbable must be the truth. And so Koschak, his character was kind of like that. Koschak goes on to say, and usually at the end, he goes, of the show, he says this: judge for yourselves its believability, and then try to tell yourself, wherever you may be, it couldn't happen here. So I believe that was kind of his Spock thing, since Star Trek came out first, right? So we'll give it to Leonard Nimoy and Roddenberry, right? Getting to the UFOs. I was looking for UFO sightings in the United States since 1968. And then it's like I was getting this thing where it says, there's no single official count of UFO or UAP sightings in the United States, as most reports comes from voluntary civilian databases rather than a centralized government registry, right? But then guess what? What did we have? You remember the TV show? Yeah, I know, I watched maybe too much TV. The U.S. Air Force Project Blue Book, which ran until 1969, investigated 12,618 cases in total from 1947 to 1969, with the vast majority occurring before 1968. Now, the National UFO Reporting Center, or NUFORC, or maybe you want to call them New Force, you figure it out. They're supposed to be the most comprehensive civilian database, and this was founded in 1974. Now, let me tell you what gets interesting about this. They cataloged nearly 170,000 reports overall, and the overwhelming majority are from right here in the United States. 170,000. Now, reliable estimates place the number of U.S. sightings reported since 1968 in the range of 100 to 170,000. And primarily, this is post 1974 civilian submissions, all right? So that's a lot of them were post 1974, just, a little FYI, right? So I think that's pretty fascinating. Now, the official government investigations, which is the AARO, have reviewed thousands more, but most remain classified or they attribute them to quote unquote mundane cases, right? States with the most sightings, all right? So this comes from New Fork, or if you want to be cool, New Force. This is recently updated, actually. We say mid 2026, I guess, just recently. So they're showing the states with the most sightings. California is sitting at 17,000, Florida at 11,000, Washington State is sitting at almost 8,000. Then you have other high volume states such as Texas, Arizona, and New York, right? So California lead is attributed to large population, diverse geography, and dark sky areas. And they're talking about per capita rates are often higher in states like Washington, Oregon, Vermont, and Montana. So we'll give you an example of that. So New Fork adds, the most recent sightings, and they're getting submissions like every few weeks. And they had a huge amount. It was like something like 929 submissions within a certain period, right? And so that, I guess, boosted it up to 1% of, okay, I'm not sure. All right. The Pentagon's AARO, their office issued multiple batches of declassified UAP files in 2026, which I'm sure you guys, especially UFO people, you guys remember that. So we're looking at 2026, May, June, and July. I think the most recent was July 10th, as a matter of fact. And they also included new military and NASA-related sightings, such as green orbs, disk, infrared videos from the Pacific, Atlantic, and the Middle East. So they included the Middle East. I guess we didn't want to be alone in all of this. They included the Middle East. Now, 1 July 2026 report described an object, and this is a quote. The pilot said, "It's unlike anything I had seen in 28 years of service." 28 years of service, okay? We've also had a lot of famous people who have reported UFO sightings, so I think this is important. We got to think about this. We have famous people, and then we're going to get into some of the folks that are actually in the military. So many well figures across politics, entertainment, space, you guys know it. They've been reporting UFOs and UAPs, and they're documented. And that's the other part. These are documented cases. So this part isn't really hearsay conjecture. They're getting it from the horse's mouth. It's been documented. So U.S. President Jimmy Carter, 39th president, reported seeing a bright glowing object hovering in the sky near Leary, Georgia in 1969 when he was governor. He later filed a formal report with the International UFO Bureau. Well, I'm assuming he's trying to let everybody around the world know what's up. Ronald Reagan, 40th U.S. president, described seeing a UFO while flying in a plane as governor of California in the 1970s. And he also, and this is true, he referenced UFOs in multiple public speeches. And then if we look at astronauts and those who are involved in the space space industry, you had Buzz Aldrin, Apollo 11 astronaut, along with the crew. Wasn't just Buzz. Along with the crew, reported seeing an unidentified object during the 1969 moon mission that initially they could not explain. Later, of course, for public record, NASA says it's a detached panel Yeah, they all thought that that detached panel was a UFO. Right? Right. Gordon Cooper, Mercury and Gemini astronaut, reported multiple UFO sightings during his Air Force and NASA career, including a 1957 incident where he tracked an object that outmaneuvered his jet. Now, let's talk about musicians, entertainers, superstars. John Lennon claimed he and his assistant saw a UFO hovering near his New York apartment in 1974. He even sketched it and referenced the event in interviews. And we have a recent one. We have a couple recent ones. Miley Cyrus has described multiple sightings, including a flying metal chunk, that sounds so Miley, and orb-like objects in the sky. Justin Bieber reported seeing a UFO with his wife Haley while driving in 2020. Other notable figures, Muhammad Ali, Rumble Young Man Rumble, stated he saw a UFO in the 1970s and believed in extraterrestrial life. Shirley MacLaine has written extensively about her UFO encounters and spiritual beliefs related to them, right? Yeah, the thing about, these beings, check out her books. These reports span decades and range from brief visual observations to more detailed accounts. Most famous individuals emphasize they're not claiming extraterrestrial origin. So they just want to say for the record, they're not trying to scare you guys and say they saw little green men. What they're saying is that they saw something they could not identify, okay? Something that they didn't know. And this is kind of my favorite one because I heard him on an interview talking about this, and I think it was probably the first time that he spoke on this. Dan Aykroyd. Yes, Dan Aykroyd did report seeing UFOs, and Dan Aykroyd, Ghostbusters, Saturday Night Live, Blues Brothers. He has discussed multiple UFO sightings in interviews, podcasts, and his writings. He has described observing unidentified objects in the sky and has long expressed interest in the paranormal and the extraterrestrial topics. Aykroyd has, this, he's appeared in documentaries and shows like Ancient Aliens, sharing his experience. The reason why I connected to Dan Aykroyd, because it was something that he said that I could relate to. I personally have seen them, and I've seen them more than once, and I've seen them with witnesses. And one time I saw one that was massive. And this thing was flying like it owned the sky. It was flying very slow. It was very large, and it had a ton of lights. And it looked like something you would see out of those UFO movies when they're invading the Earth. This thing was huge. Was huge. I mean, we're talking about football field size. And it's kind of like when you, what's that, Independence Day? Will Smith, and you see the shadow, this massive UFO, and it, these guys are like trying to party up and, praise the alien space gods, and they all get zapped. Well, it was like that. And on some of the occasions when I've seen these UFOs, and this is what Aykroyd had said, he kind of felt like it was almost not quite an out-of-body thing, but there was something very different about the environment. And I can share with you on some other episodes when I talk about UFOs more, but I actually believe it is and what's really going on. All right. So, UFOs and non-terrestrial theories, or maybe we call them hypotheses, okay? So UFOs are now called UAPs, and they're officially defined as unidentified aerial phenomena. By definition, the origin remains unknown until investigated. Yeah, I think we got that part. The vast majority of the reports are later explained as mundane objects, such as aircraft, drones, balloons, satellites, or optical illusions. And with them filling the air, the sky with satellites, and I think that's all part of, you're not going to be able to tell a UFO from a satellite type thing. People are going to grow more and more confused. No government investigation, including the U.S. Pentagon's All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. So that's your AARO, All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Yeah, it's like a lot of words there. Has confirmed any UFO or UAP as being not of this world. Well, it's kind of interesting because how do you define not of this world? Think about that. Most of the conversations around UFOs or UAPs, it's relative to, we know this, extraterrestrial spacecraft, vehicles from another planet or star system, interdimensional or advanced unknown technologies such as objects originating from beyond conventional space-time. Pay attention to that. Objects originating from beyond conventional space-time, right? Secret foreign or adversarial technology, which could be another country that's got technology that we know nothing about, but we got some mean technology, man. All right. Advanced drones or aircraft from another country out of this world. So that's the description of secret foreign or adversarial technology, okay? Here we go. Reported extraterrestrial encounters in the United States. I told you I was going to bring all this stuff up. So we have numbers, something like this. 1992, a Roper poll suggests as many as, if you think about this, is kind of creepy. 1 in 50 U.S. adults, or roughly 2%, may have had experiences they interpreted as alien abduction. 2% of the adults in the U.S. population. I think that's kind of something we need to think about. Later analysis and other polls from the 1990s also pointed to around the same thing. So they did another poll, they did polls, and they kept coming up with the same numbers. So yeah, there's something to this. Using National UFO Reporting Center, back to New Fork or New Force or whatever you want to call it, their data as a proxy in recent 2026 studies estimate that the national odds of a reported alien abduction at approximately 1 in 1,770 people. So 1 in 1,770 people, which is about 0.056% of the population. And this is based on sightings since 1974. Okay. No U.S. government investigation has confirmed any extraterrestrial encounters. Yeah, we know that. That's why we keep trying to get all those documents out, because they won't confirm it, right? They're not going to do that. States with the highest number of claims. All right, highest per capita, most likely based on population, right? Delaware, Washington, New York. All right, so there, I guess New York is third with 8,000 sightings since 1974, or 1 per every 1,003 residents in New York. They've been abducted or seen a UFO. New Hampshire, Idaho, Vermont, Maine, Oregon, Wyoming, they frequently appear in the top tiers for abduction-style reports. Fascinating. Highest absolute numbers, California, of course. Right, California. California leads with the most total reports, including 61 specific alien abduction claims in one analysis. Okay, you got to parse that. In one analysis, 61 specific. So they're saying in one situation, 61 people are claiming to have been abducted. And then it says other states frequently mentioned for higher rates include Colorado and Florida. Now getting to specifically reported alien abduction cases in U.S. history. So I listed about 20 of the most notable. All right. And you've heard these, but for those who are kind of new to this, that are curious, I'll just read them off and you can look it up. Betty and Barney Hill, 1961 in New Hampshire. First widely publicized abduction case involving a married couple who claimed missing time, and they also claimed that they were being experimented on, right? Herbert Shermer, 1967 Nebraska police officer, so he's paid to be an observer, who reported being taken aboard a craft and examined, all right? Betty Andreessen, 1967, Massachusetts, right? Detailed account of multiple abductions involving religious and medical experiments. Okay. Oh, excuse me, medical elements, which still medical experiments. All right, sorry about that. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, 1973. And I'm trying to pronounce this city. The Pascagoula case. 2 men claimed abduction by robotic beings while fishing. Sorry, Mississippi, I don't get there so very often. So if I didn't say the city correctly, forgive me. Travis Walton, we know about this in the movie Fire in the Sky, 1975 in Arizona. Logger allegedly abducted and missing for 5 days. And of course, he was talking about experimentation as well. We have the Allagash 4 in 1976 in Maine. 4 men claimed abduction during a camping trip with shared missing time and memories. So they all shared this missing time and memories. Stanford, Kentucky abductions, 1976, multiple women. Okay, maybe people in the Pentagon got a little, their testosterone was up, according to Hegseth. He's going to test for that. Maybe that's what it was. All right, I know. It didn't. But Stanford, Kentucky abductions, 1976, multiple women reported being taken from a car and examined. John Salter Jr., 1988, North Dakota, university professor, and his son claimed abduction while driving. Linda Cortile, Napolitano, get me? 1989, New York, Manhattan case involving an alleged levitation into a craft and witnessed by others. And I've seen a documentary on that. It's pretty fascinating. Whitley Strieber, 1985, Onward, New York. Author of Communion described repeated encounters and examinations. Kathy and Peter, don't know the last name. This is Kathy and Peter, 1990s, various states. Part of Bud Hopkins' research on multiple abductees. Okay. Wow. The Brooklyn Bridge case, 1990s New York, reported multiple witnesses in the New York area. The 1978 DeKalb County case, Georgia, family reported being taken from their home. The 1980s Gulf Breeze encounters in Florida, a series of sightings and claimed abductions by Walters and others. And of course, we remember the Arizona, 1994 Arizona family case. Multiple families reported ongoing abductions. And don't forget the triangles, right? Remember that? The multiple sightings. 1964, the Socorro incident in New Mexico, often classified as a close encounter with the possible abduction elements. All right, a close encounter with possible abduction elements. Lonnie Zamora. 1978, Hudson Valley case, the New York, Connecticut, a wave of sightings with abduction reports. 1987, Copley Woods case, Indiana. Family abduction claim investigated by researchers. Anybody hear anything about that? In 1992, the Kentucky family case, multiple generations claimed repeated abductions. And in the 2000 Texas rancher cases, scattered reports from rural areas involving missing time and physical evidence claims, right? So I just wanted to go into that. And real quick, we're going to talk about some paranormal creature sightings in the United States, because a lot of them feel that these are related to the UFOs. And so we know the most famous one is Bigfoot or Sasquatch, which dominates the data. More than 5,600 credible, they list this as credible reports across the United States. All right. And we have the Mothman. And that has had several reports, including me. I've seen him, right? Or it, or whatever it is. And I got a whole story about that one. And I don't think it's quite like the Mothman that they're describing, but it was definitely, in looks, but in regards to what its true nature is, I have an opinion about that. So the Mothman has had several hundred reports total, concentrated in 2 main waves, 1966, 1967 in West Virginia, 2011, 2017 in the Chicago area. And of course, there was a sighting of the Yeti, and I believe that was I think it was in the Arctic, but I can't remember when I was a kid. And they actually had footage of this. Can't forget that. I'll never forget that. And we have other cryptids, Chupacabra, Jersey Devil, the skunk ape, which is probably relative to Bigfoot because they're always reporting Bigfoot's got some bad BO. So, these sightings have ranged from about 6,000 to 8,000 self-reported cases, and of course, Bigfoot is the vast majority. And so, the states that are pretty much driven by Bigfoot, you're looking at Washington, 724. California's up there with almost 500. Florida with almost 400. Ohio at 326, and Michigan at 227. And then you have other states, notable activity, including Oregon, Idaho. And then you have, don't forget the Chupacabra and the Mothman, right? I told you this was kind of going to be a fun episode. We're going to talk about UFOs, and idea. I threw in the cryptids and abductions and things of that nature. Creatures by region, Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, California, totally all about Bigfoot and Sasquatch, okay? Florida in the Southwest, the skunk ape, which is supposedly a variant of Bigfoot, and in Ohio in the Midwest, Bigfoot, also known as the grass man, and occasional reports of the Mothman, right? So West Virginia, definitely the Mothman, winged humanoid with red eyes. That's from 1966, 1967. They had 100 sightings. Again, Chicago was in 2011 through 2017, 160 reports. All right. And you have Chupacabra, also known as the goat sucker, and also described as reptilian or canine. And they say that there's very few Yeti reports. And so, Alaska, before we go, this is going to be one of our last ones, but I'm just going to talk about some UFO sightings in Alaska. Because Alaska they have that, their triangle over there. So like most notable reported cases in regards to UFO sightings in Alaska. And of course, they're saying that they're unverified. 1947, Anchorage disc sighting. 3 teenagers reported a white disc-shaped object with an orange stripe streaming across the sky at high speed. Japan Airlines Flight 1628, commercial pilots reported 3 UFOs moving erratically and emitting strange lights while flying over Alaska. And the objects were tracked on radar. I believe that's verified, okay? Cold War military encounters, multiple reports from 1950s through 1980s involving fast-moving or hovering objects tracked by radar near strategic sites, okay? Recent pilot and civilian reports are ongoing, and the triangular or orb-shaped crafts, including those near Fairbanks and remote areas. And some of these are being reported by military veterans. And so I wanted to close with that. And I know the show was, it wasn't too long. Maybe it was. But we were going to do something fun. We were going to talk about UFOs, and I want to open up this conversation. I want to continue it because while we're being distracted with all these other things, right, life still goes on. And so I got to tell you, I'm Michael P. America. Do you believe in vampires, little boys? I'm out of here.